Dirtle Magic. Thank you for tuning in to Dirtle Magic. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell if you like the content you see here today, and leave a like and share the video with someone you might think is interested. Leaving those likes really helps us out, but another way to help us out is by using our TCG Player affiliate link below. If you're looking for singles, sealed product, or gaming accessories, please consider using our link to support the channel. We also have some playmats at inkgaming.com. Go ahead and hit the link in the description to check those out. Alright, let's grab some spells and dirtle with some magic. Hello and welcome back to Dirtle Magic and another episode of the Dice Bag. Coming at you today with the finally fully spoiled cycle of the uncommon legendary creatures in Strixhaven. So let's go over them one at a time and discuss maybe how the decks would be built and what you can do with them. Of course, these are just my first initial thoughts, and you may build your deck differently or see another pathway, of course, and that's what makes EDH and Commander great. So let's get into it, and we'll start with Killian the Ink Duelist. Killian Ink Duelist is a legendary white and black creature for only white and black. It's a legendary 2/2 human warlock in case Warlock Tribal ever becomes a thing. Lifelink and Menace, but more importantly, spells you cast that target a creature cost 2 less to cast. This can be great for some of that more expensive instant speed removal that costs 4 mana and up, especially if it has 2 generic casting. Its casting cost like Hagra Mauler, which if we can't get the regular cost reduction, we can get off Killian as long as we're targeting a creature, and as long as it's a legal target. Otherwise, we can use Utter End to get rid of anything, but if we are targeting a creature, it is only white-black, and it exiles, and that's a pretty decent cost reduction on that kind of removal. Another type of card that goes really well with Killian are Aura Enchantments. They target creatures when you cast them, they have to have a legal target. Stuff like Oblivion Ring and Banishing Light won't do this. However, if you want to go and take this deck a little bit Tron, you do have white enchantments like Battle Mastery to give double strike, and then you have Unquestioned Authority, and then there's the battlefield draws you a card, but it also gives your Killian protection from all creatures. Some black enchantments you could consider is Pheresis. I'm not sure if I said that right, but it gives the creature infect, so a lot easier to kill your opponents that way. Plus, he already has built-in invasion with Menace, and if he gets threatened off the table a lot, you could always cast something like Unholy Indenture for just black. When it dies, it returns him to the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it, so some insurance there as well. If you do want to play around with auras, getting cards off of it with Shram and other things like Mesa Enchantress is always going to be good for you. And if you want something that cares about auras otherwise, Daxos the Return can make you some very nice tokens that can get fairly large fairly quickly. And of course, there's always Constellation to consider. White is also very good at bringing back enchantments, and you can bring back auras with that. Plus, black can bring back creatures, so keeping Killian off the table and not suited up is going to be very hard for your opponents if you build the deck to those specifications. Off to Witherbloom with a black-green legend, Dinah, Soul Steeper. It's a legendary 1/3 Dryad Druid. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life, so it's almost an aristocrat there. 1, sacrifice another creature. She gets X0 till end of turn, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. Some more traditional aspects for this commander could be Poison Tip Archer and Zulaport Cutthroat. When stuff dies, each opponent loses 1 life. With Zulaport Cutthroat in particular, you also gain 1 life, which triggers her top ability, so each opponent will lose an additional life. There are other effects to consider, however. Essence Warden, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under anyone's control, you gain 1 life, triggering the top effect of Dinah. And then there's Doomgape, a 10/10 Trampler with at the beginning of your upkeep sacrifice a creature, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. Doesn't matter how big the creature is, it can sacrifice itself to itself, and because it's a 10/10, it also feeds into that second ability of Dinah to maybe hit for some extra big commander damage. Then we have some creatures that can just plain bring themselves back. Reassembling Skeleton, if you pay 1 in black, can return to the battlefield tapped under your control. Very good to sacrifice again if you need to trigger any other kind of effect if you have Essence Warden out. Fido Titan, however, when it dies, goes back at the beginning of the next upkeep, so it can come straight away, plus it has that high power, which again feeds into our commander's second ability. Then we have other creatures that kind of replace themselves anyway. Thragtusk comes into play, we do gain life, triggering our first ability, and then when we sacrifice it to get 5-0 to our commander or some other effect, we get a token to sacrifice again after it dies. We also have Puppeteer Click, which has Persist, so when it dies, it'll come back and trigger again, and it steals something from our opponent's graveyard, then exiles it. However, we can use our commander to sacrifice it to give her another boost, and potentially gain even more life depending on what they have in their graveyard. Next up, we have Zamoni of the Quandrix, and she is a Quandrix prodigy. For green and blue, you get a legendary 1/2 human wizard with 1 tap, put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, and 4 tap, draw a card. If you control 8 or more lands, draw 2 cards instead. Unfortunately, I don't find this commander particularly inspiring. It's kind of like you want to front your deck with something less scary, and it's a little bit slower, but it still does all the things Simic has done for years on end now, and while I love the flavor of the card, the art is adorable. I don't want to spend too much time on this, so let's just go through the usual suspects. First up, we have Harrow and Roiling Regrowth, essentially the same card. What this does is it allows you to sacrifice a land at instant speed to go get 2 other lands out of your deck onto the battlefield, untapped mind you, so you can use them immediately. What this does for this deck in particular is it thins out the deck, so when you activate her draw ability, you draw less lands in particular once you get there, and you can draw those 2 cards, and it gets you even more mana to the battlefield from your deck. Then, of course, there's all those landfall effects, the new commander that came out during Zendikar SC, the Tyrant of Gyre Strait. Then, of course, we have Ancient Green Warden and Royal Elemental here. Ancient Green Warden is Panharmonicon for your landfall triggers, and Royal Elemental just ruins your opponent's day by stealing all of their stuff. And green and blue has a lot of hexproof and shrouds, so there's no way they can get to it easily as long as you protect it. Of course, it wouldn't be a Simic deck unless we were untapping our tappable commander. Looking at those abilities, we have Kior's Follower to untap another target permanent, which can be our commander or a land if we need it. And then Retreat to Koralheim, which just adds landfall to the untap effect, and of course, as many of you know if you've ever played a landfall deck that has blue in it, can go infinite from there. So we're not really looking at anything extra spectacular here with this commander, unfortunately. If you do want to be a little bit more casual and not have all that power straight away up front, you can play this commander. But I mean, at the rate Simic and green can ramp, you're only putting it off a turn, and frankly, I'm just not inspired by this. But if this is your kind of thing, maybe running her in a more casual meta will at least assuage some people from trying to murder you off the table. Next up for Prismari, we have the Mercurial Artist, Rutha. 1 blue, red for legendary, 1 for Orc Shaman. 2, return this creature to its owner's hand. Copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Now, what I really like about this card is actually the quote-unquote drawback in her cost, which is she must be returned to your hand for this to activate. So by the time this ability goes to resolve, you already paid that cost. She's already back in your hand. So I want to focus this deck on a little bit of protecting her, reducing that cost, and getting her back to the battlefield so we can use her again for free if possible. A good place to start, I feel, would be the Expertise cycle from Kaladesh and Aether Revolt. Karizev's Expertise says gain control of target creature or vehicle until end of turn, untap it against haste on the turn, then we may cast something with the converted mana cost or mana value of 2 or less from our hand. Now that doesn't really help us with our commander, but it could help us with some other stuff, especially if we copy it and get 2 things for free. So we get somewhat of a cost reduction there. What's better is Brawl's Expertise, where it says to return up to 3 artifacts and creatures to their owner's hands, and then we may cast something that costs 4 or less. So we could cast this, copy it for 2 more, and immediately replay our commander from our hand, plus something else potentially in 4 mana. I mean, essentially cost reduction is nothing to sneeze at. Next, we have essentially more removal like Baral's Expertise. Flood of Tears returns all non-land permanents to their owner's hand, and then if we return 4 permanents to our hand that are non-token, because tokens won't return to our hand, we get to play any permanent card from our hand onto the battlefield. It's not cast, but we can put down our commander, we can put down something huge otherwise, a large enchantment, a large artifact, whatever we need at that point. Electro Dominance is somewhat similar, deals X damage to any target, including Planeswalkers. Then we can cast a card from our hand without paying its mana cost with a converted mana cost X or less, or in this case, mana value X or less. Could be our commander, might not be, but with our commander, we can copy it, get down our commander, and something else. So I think this is an interesting way to go with her, especially when we have something like Porphyros on the battlefield. Of course, reducing the cost of her ability down to 1 from 2 can be a saving grace. So we do have Training Grounds, which will reduce it only by 1 because of the clause on the card. It can't reduce it to less than 1. And then Heartstone to reduce every activation of any creature by 1. It also can't reduce it to less than 1. So we don't get any freebies. And Training Ground is monetarily expensive, but there are other cards you can use, and I think picking a few of those up if you're really going to want to abuse the commander itself, plus maybe some other cards in the deck, is a very viable option. Then we have some cloning effects we can add to the deck. To clone anything, Spark Double for a legendary creature or planeswalker, Clever Impersonator for anything. There's tons of new clone effects that came out in Kaldheim. There's a new clone spell in this set, so we won't be short on any cloning effects. However, I do recommend using creature-based ones or permanent-based ones, because you need to clone her first if you want to do that before bouncing her, because then if you copy the clone spell, she won't be there and they'll both fizzle. So unfortunately, there's no go there. Another card I want to look out for the deck is Veilstone Amulet. It says, whenever we play a spell, or cast a spell in this case, creatures you control can't be the target of spells or abilities our opponents control. It's essentially hexproof, and what this does is it closes the window for our opponents to respond. While our commander does have a very good ability for that kind of thing, we can pay 2 and bounce her to our hand even just to save her if we have something to target. This will give an extra layer of protection, especially if we're depending on like some other creatures to help us double up on some of the effects. Last but not least, we have Quintus, Field Historian, probably the most adorable commander I've ever seen, but that's my opinion. 3 red-white for a legendary 2/4 Elephant Cleric. Spirits you control get 1/0, and whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. Noticeably, it says that 1 or more cards, so you have to do 1 at a time if you want to maximize this effect, and it says cards. Not artifacts, not creatures, not instants, not sorceries, not planeswalkers, but anything. So this seems like a good thing to me. Let's go ahead and check out what we can potentially abuse with this. First up, we have 2 classic cards in Revel Arc and Karmic Guide. Revel Arc is a 4/3 flyer for 5 mana. When it leaves the battlefield, return up to 2 target creature cards with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It also has Evoke, so we can use its ability for the Evoke cost and it immediately dies, putting itself in the graveyard. Karmic Guide says, Flying Protection from Black. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you can loop these 2 via a sack outlet just to get a bunch of stuff back, and there's an infinite combo there. Karmic Guide also has Echo 3 white, so you can just let it die to put itself in the graveyard if you so choose to do so. Once we get that combo going, of course we have things like Impact Tremors, Porphyros God of the Forge, Terror of the Peaks, Warstorm Surge, any other number of a creature comes into play and we burn our opponents. I'm sure you've seen that deck before. Porphyros, on the bright side, also has a boost for your spirits if you make a bunch of them, which you will with this combo. Some other cards you can include in this deck are cards like Promise of Tomorrow. Whenever a creature we control dies, it gets exiled, which removes it from the graveyard. It's not a replacement effect. And then at the beginning of each end step, if we control no creatures, we can sacrifice this to bring all of those things back. This is a high risk, high reward play in this deck though, because you will be making those spirit creature tokens with Quintus in play, so you will need to get rid of those spirit tokens for this to work, and it can be nuked. However, you can get your entire board back if you do so. Past in Flames removes instants and sorceries from our graveyard as long as we're casting them, because it gives them all flashback, thereby making us even more spirits. We also have some Mastery Animation, thereby removing things from our graveyard. Through Second Sunrise, Scrap Mastery, Faith's Reward, there's a number of these things, usually in white, that help us out here. Second Sunrise says each player, though, returns to play all artifact creatures, enchantment, and land cards that were put into the graveyard this turn from play. So, it can help our opponents. It is instant, though, and it is older, so be careful with that one. Scrap Mastery, however, trades all the artifacts we have in play with all our artifacts in our graveyard. So it opens up some potential combo wins with like Mycosynth Lattice, but usually if you're going to be building equipment or have a lot of those like tribal anthem effects, Heraldic Banner, Vanquisher's Banner, stuff like that, this could actually work out really well for you if people just keep blowing them all up. Plus it gives you a bunch of spirits. If all else fails, we have creatures that remove themselves from the graveyard. Anointed Priest can embalm itself, and it says whenever a creature token enters the battlefield under our control, we gain 1 life, and hey, we're making spirit tokens, so why not? Then we have Soul of Theros. It is a 6/6 for 6 with Vigilance. It does say, for 4 white, creatures you control get 2/2 and gain first strike and lifelink on the turn, or you can exile it to do that from the graveyard again. making the spirits absolutely huge. You gain a bunch of life, potentially take out an opponent, so I think it's a good include towards the top end of the deck. That's it for this video. Let me know what you think about the uncommon gold legends from Strixhaven. I think they're pretty unique. There's a lot you can put behind them. They do give you a direction to build the deck, and there's a few directions you can take each deck, except maybe the Simic one, but you can let me know if I'm, wrong in the comments below. I'd love to have my mind open. Maybe I missed something that you saw, or you can go ahead and tell me which one's your favorite and how you might build it out yourself, of course. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and share the video if you think somebody else might be interested to get some ideas about how to build these commanders. Stay safe out there, and if you do get to play Paper Magic, make sure you help other people stay safe. I'll see you on the next video.